after you log into Onshape, you should see something very similar to what you see on your screen. This is what it looks like in my account. I have already created several files and projects in years past. So you're seeing what I have in my account. If you've just created an account with Onshape, you will probably see nothing but maybe some tutorials, maybe some how-to videos, or some how-to documents. But what you want to look for primarily is, first of all, this is where your account information is right here. So you'll notice my profile name is set right there. You can make your account changes as needed. The Learning Center is right here. Use that for activity 4.1C. And to get started with a new file, you would want to go over here. You're not really creating, you're almost creating a project, and within that project you're going to have different types of files created. So we're going to go to create, and we're going to choose document, and we want to give this a name. For example, we'll go ahead and call this activity 4.1D, and we're going to click OK. And once your file finally opens, this is what will open. You will open up a Part Studio file. You will also have available, just as this file is created, this document or project is created, an assembly file. But we're not going to need that right now. But what we are going to need is this area right here. And so I'm going to show you how to take what you have here and get started drawing the objects from 4.1D, but I just want to quickly show you just the overview of it. So just quickly, these are the planes that we're going to work with. So we're going to start probably more likely drawing our object in the front view, but there also is a right side plane and also a top plane. You notice right here in the middle, that's called the origin. You can actually turn those off. You can come over here on the left and you can see the geometry that is available. So you just hit the little eyeball and hide it, and you can hide all of those. I would recommend you leave these on until you at least get started drawing your object. But again, this is just a simple overview. I'm getting ready to show you how to draw the objects from activity 4.1D. Now we're going to start with the first object from activity 4.1D. I want to quickly show you that activity just so we have a point of reference in what we're talking about. So I have already opened this file up. You'll see this is the object that we're going to draw. It tells you for instructional purposes that you are to follow the instructions to create the 3D models of each of the following objects and respond to the prompt. So there's an object for you to draw, and there's also some things for you to respond to. You can respond to these questions in your notebook, and you can give me an image of the object that you create in Onshape, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So this is the object that we're making, and so we're going to go back to Onshape, and I think it's best to draw this object in its front view. So this is the front face of this object, and so I would recommend this is what you'd want to start drawing first. So in Onshape, I'm going to simply come over here to this front plane. I want to right click on the edge of this, and I'm going to say new sketch. And when I do that, you can see there's already a sketch now on the front plane. This is the view cube. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose front just so I can look straight at that plane. Now we are still seeing the other work planes that were turned on, so I think now's a good time to turn these things off. So we're going to turn all of these off. None of these are needed anymore now that we have a sketch plane. What you want to do is draw the basic shape of this object. So we're going to draw this shape right here. Notice that our dimensions are in inches. So we're going to go here and we're just going to go to line, and we're going to draw the shape. And as you draw, you'll want to pay close attention to the dimensions that you'll see kind of in blue there. And so I'm just going to get it close. This tells me that this side of the object is about 1.5. This is about an inch. And it doesn't have to be exact, but you just want to kind of get it close. This is also about an inch. This is about 2 inches. I'm going to show you how to fix this in just a moment. So now what I want to do is make these collinear. And so what I did is I come over here and I kind of just guide it over here to this point, and I'm going to guide it back, and it keeps that point. So it's going to lock these two lines together. And this is about another inch right here. And then I'm going to come down, and again I'm going to guide it over here and let it snap to the end right there. And then this is about 0.5. Then I'm going to come up, over, and back down, and I'm going to close this shape. Now we have a closed shape. What we need to do is dimension this so that it is the correct size. We do that by going to dimension. So we'll choose dimension, and if you just simply choose a line, you can pull it straight up and change it to whatever dimension it needs to be, and it will modify it. So we change that to 2. We're going to choose this line, and this is going to be 1.5. And so you can choose lines, but you can also choose points. So I'm just going to, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to choose this point and this point to give me a dimension right here, and this one is going to be 1 inch. And see, here is going to be, I'm going to go back to the old way. I'm just going to click on this line here and pull it up. This is going to be an inch, and this is going to be an inch. If I wanted to check it, I can, but I know because I've already locked these in together that that is an inch. This one here is going to be 0.5. This is going to be 0.5. And then this vertical line right here is also going to be 0.5. And so now our object, or our 2D sketch of this object, is fully dimensioned, and it is the correct size. And so now we're ready to extrude it. To extrude it, if we want to finish this sketch, we can do that. We can hit the green check mark, which will finish this sketch. Now we want to go right here to extrude. I actually like to look at this from a more of an isometric point of view, so I can see the extrusion as it happens. To change this back to an isometric view, you can come over here to view cube, and you can hit this top right hand corner of this view cube and do something like that. Or you can actually come right here to this little drop down camera and render option and choose isometric, and so it changes it just a little bit. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to now extrude this. It tells me that this object has an extrusion of 2.5. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to type in for the depth 2.5. And so I need to choose what I want to extrude, which is this entire thing. I could have chose this first and then typed in my depth. I just did a little bit backwards from what I typically do. So I'm going to choose this sketch, and then it's going to extrude it 2.5 is that I've already put in. So if I wanted to change the direction of this, you can hit this arrow and it will extrude it in the opposite direction. That will come into play for other objects that we make later on. So let's just, for the sake of doing so, let's just leave it like this, and then we will hit the check mark. And so if you go back and look at the object, you'll see that we have this, and we have this little feature right here that we need to add, and so we're going to add that now. So we're going to go back to sketch, and we're going to choose the side of this face. This is where that little, what I call a little diving board or shelf, is going to be added to the side of this object. And now you'll see a new sketch plane has been added to this surface that I just chose. I'm going to choose the right side view of this view cube so I can see just this side. And instead of, I could use a line, but this is going to be almost like a rectangle, so I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw the rectangular shape on the side of this face. I'm going to use dimension to dimension it correctly. It tells me in the instructions that this is 1.5. It tells me from this edge to the side here is going to be 0.5. And then from the bottom, actually from the top of this, so I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to go back to dimension. I'm going to choose the top of this and then the top edge here, and it tells me that this is 0.75. And I'm just hitting enter after I put those dimensions on. So I'm ready to finish this sketch, and I'm going to go back to this view right here, which allows me to see the side, and I'm going to go to extrude. This time I'm going to choose what I want to extrude, which is just this right here, and I need to put in a dimension. And this is, it tells me in the instructions right here that this is extruded 0.75, so I need to change this 1 inch to 0.75, and then I can just hit kind of enter to make sure it updates and changes, and then I'm just going to hit the green check mark. So now this object is actually complete. So this is what this view looks like. Again, I'm going to go back to the more isometric view, and there you go. So this is the first object. We can right click down here and we can rename this, and we're going to call this object 1. And so we have just completed object number 1 from activity 4.1D. Before you move on to object number 2, or before we move on to object number 2, do not forget to respond to the questions below for number 1, part A and part B. Create the 3D solid model of the object using the most effective method. We've already done that, so that's a check mark. But B does have you respond to this. So which method, additive, subtractive, or a combination of the two, did you use in this object? So you want to respond to those, and I may not mention these for all of these objects, but you do want to make sure you respond to these little prompts down here below the object. And now we're getting ready to move on to object number 2. So now we're ready to start object number 2. We'll go back to the instructions just to look and see what object number 2 looks like. This is object number 2. Notice that all of our dimensions are in millimeters. So we'll want to make that change in just a moment. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit this plus sign, and I'm going to choose Part Studio. And then we're ready to really start drawing and creating this object. Before we begin creating this object, we need to change our units from inches to millimeters. So we're going to go up here to this document menu button, and we're going to choose that, and there's one that is called workspace units. So we're going to choose that one, and we're going to, right now our default length unit is set to inch. We're going to change that to millimeter, and we're going to hit this green check mark. Now we're going to start drawing it. So if we go back to the instructions, you'll see this is what the front of this object looks like. So that's what we're going to draw. So we're going to go back here and we're going to right click on the edge of the front view or the front plane, and we're going to hit new sketch. And as I did on the last object, I'm going to hit the front face of this view cube so I can look at just this right here. And then I want to turn off all of these, the origin, the top plane, the front plane, and the right side plane, just so I'm left with just my sketch. I'm going to go to line, and I'm going to now begin drawing this object. So it tells me that this one leg here is a total of 40 millimeters high. So I'm just going to get it close. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. We'll fix that with a dimension tool. And I'm just going to draw this shape, and then I'm going to let the dimension tool get it exact. I'm not even sure how close I am to drawing this to the actual measurements. I'm not checking it. So this is the object, this is the sketch. So I'm going to go to dimension. It tells me the overall height is 40, so I'm going to change that to 40 millimeters. The overall length is going to be 60 millimeters. I do know that this part of the object is only 10 millimeters. This part of the object is 25 millimeters, and the depth of this is going to be set to 15 millimeters. So now we have our 2D sketch created. I'm going to hit the finish sketch button. I'm going to go to just the isometric view here just to look at it. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit by scrolling the mouse button, and then I'm going to slide it over. I'm holding the middle button, the scroll button on my mouse down to pan to move this over, and then I'm going to go to extrude, and then I'm going to choose what I want to extrude, and it tells me that the extrusion is 30 millimeters. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change this to 30 millimeters. I'm going to kind of hit enter just so it accepts that new number, and then I'm going to hit the green check mark. So the next part we have to do is add this little cutout right here. And so what we're going to do is create a sketch on the side of this object, and we're going to go to the right face of this view cube just so we can look at this. I'm going to go to rectangle and draw this square. Obviously I drew it way too small. I clicked way too fast. So I'm going to dimension this, but I can use this. So I'm going to dimension it. It says that the total length is 15 millimeters. And so let's see if I can slide this thing over. There we go. Slid over by dragging that edge there. Go back to dimension, and it tells me from this edge to this edge is going to be 3 millimeters. The total height of this little cutout that we're making is 10 millimeters. And from the bottom of this little slot to the bottom edge of this object is going to be 5 millimeters. And so now we can go back to hit this finish sketch button right here, go back to the isometric view, and we have the thing, but we need to cut it out. And so we're going to assume that this cuts all the way through. We don't know that to be sure, but I'm going to make that assumption. So we're going to go to extrude, and this time we're going to choose what we want to extrude, which is this rectangle right here, and we're going to hit the remove option right here. So before we were always using the add option, now we're going to use the remove option. And then this says blind, which means there's a depth to it, and so we're going to say through all, so it cuts all the way through it. I probably could have put an exaggerated number. I could have put 60, which is the total length of this object, or I could have put 70 or 100, something that would have cut all the way through it, but I'm just going to change it to through all, change it from blind to through all, and then I'm going to hit the check mark. And then we are now complete with object number 2, except we need to rename this down here. We're going to call it object 2. I'm going to hit enter just so it accepts that. And now we're ready to start object number 3. To start object number 3, let's look at object number 3 real quick in the instructions. This is object number 3. Notice that this is the front of the object based on how this object is positioned in this activity. We're going to draw the right side face. I think it's a little bit easier and quicker to draw this object this way. So I know in the additive and subtractive PowerPoint presentation, it had you create the bottom and then add the back to it and then cut these slots out. But I think it's much easier just to draw this L shape right here, extrude it, and then cut out these slots. So we're going to go back to Onshape, and we're going to create a new part file, a part studio. And before we really begin, I need to check my units. I need to see if it created it in millimeters or in inches. So I'm going to go back up to here. I'm going to change, look at workspace units, and it is still in millimeters, so I'm going to change that back to inch. I'm going to hit the check mark. And so now I'm ready to start drawing. So remember, I said I was going to draw the right side of this object. So I'm going to come over here to this right side plane, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose New Sketch. Then I'm going to go to the right side view of this view cube just so I can see just the right side plane, and then I'm going to turn off the origin, the top, the front, and the right planes, so I'm left with just this object. So I'm going to go to line. I'm going to make a 2D sketch of the side of this object. This tells me, and I drew it again too short, so I'm going to delete this line, start over. Let me. So we'll go here, and it says it's 3.5, and then I go up 2.5. Again, I just want to get it close. This is about an inch. And I'm going to go down over, let it snap to the endpoint here, and then close this 2D shape and use the dimension tool to get the dimensions right. So this is 3.5. This is going to be 2.5. This is an inch. This is an inch. And now I'm really ready to extrude this, so I'm going to finish my sketch. I'm going to go back to the isometric view. Really will go like this just so I can see more of it. And then I'm going to go to extrude. I'm going to choose what I want to extrude, and then I'm going to put in my distance. I'm going to leave it on blind, and I'm going to type in the total length, which when added up together is going to be 2.5 inches. And so I'm going to hit enter to accept that value, and then I'm going to hit the green check mark to accept that total thing. So now if you look at this object, and there's the values that I added up together to get the total depth of this shape. Now I'm going to cut out these slots. It doesn't really matter which one we do first, but we can only do one at a time. So I'll just go to create a sketch. I'm going to click the front of this one, and I'm going to go to front just so I can see just the front of this. I'm going to use a rectangle. I'm going to start at this top edge and draw this rectangle like that, and I'm going to go to dimension, and I'm going to give the total length, which tells me in the instructions as 1.5. That tells me that from here to this side is going to be 0.5, and the total depth, how deep this slot is only going to be 0.5. So I'm going to hit the green check mark to finish this sketch. I'm going to go back to the isometric view just so I can see it work, and I'm going to go to extrude. I'm going to extrude this slot right here, so I'm going to make sure that that slot, that area is highlighted, and then I'm going to hit remove. And again, it's set to 1, and it looks like it would cut all the way through it, so I could leave it like that if I wanted to, but it might be a good practice if you know something's going to be cut all the way through the object, just to go ahead and say through all, just so you know once and for all it actually is going to cut through it. So we hit the green check mark. We're going to create another sketch on the top of this face here, and I'm going to go to top. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit by scrolling the middle mouse button, the scroll button on my mouse. Go to rectangle. Again, I'm going to start this rectangle here and do something like that, and then use the dimension tool to dimension these correctly. So this is going to be 1.5. This is going to be 0.5. And it doesn't matter which one I choose, but from this edge to this edge is going to be 1 inch, and that will center that slot on this face. So I'm going to hit the green check mark. I'm going to go back to my isometric view. I'm going to choose extrude. I'm going to choose what I want to extrude, and I'm going to hit the remove button. Again, it looks like it's going all the way through it, but again, I'm going to choose through all just to make sure, and I'm going to hit the green check mark. So this is object number 3, and so we want to rename this part studio, and rename it and call it object, if I can spell correctly, object 3. And now we're ready to start object number 4. Object number 4 we need to look at in the activity just so I can explain how I'm going to approach this. So we're going to scroll down and look at number 4, which looks like this. So if you can kind of imagine, you can kind of see the shape here. It looks sort of like an S. So that's kind of the shape I'm going to draw. I'm going to draw this from the right plane, and I'm going to extrude this as an entire object, and then I'm going to cut this corner out. So again, if you can imagine this little S shape here, I'm going to sketch that and then extrude it the entire length of 4.5. So I'm going to go back to Onshape. I'm going to create a new part studio file. So I'm going to hit this plus sign and hit create part studio, and I'm going to right click on the right plane, and I'm going to choose new sketch, and I'm going to hit right here, and I'm going to turn off all of these planes here. Now I will say I believe my units are set to inches because that's why I changed it to last, but if I want to check that real quick, yep, everything's inch, so we're good to go. and so we can continue on. So I'm going to double click back on sketch 1. So when I went to the workspace units, it kind of closed out of the sketch, so you'll need to double click on sketch 1 if that's what you did. So I'm going to draw this shape here. Again, I'm looking at the instructions. I've drawn this shape many times, and this is just how I've always approached it. So I'm going to draw this S shape. And then I'm going to go to dimension, and I'm going to dimension this thing. So this part of the object is 1 inch. The top part up here is going to be 1.5. This is going to be an inch. This is going to be 0.5. And so the total height of this thing, I'm going to choose this point and I'm going to choose this point so I can set the total height of this, which is 2.5. And I believe that this object is set correctly. Actually, there's one dimension I'm missing. I need a dimension from here to here, and this is going to be 0.5. So I've set that. And now I believe I have everything set correctly. So I'm going to finish this sketch, and I'm going to go to the isometric view so I can see this as it extrudes. I'm going to go to extrude. I'm going to choose what I want to extrude. I'm going to type in my total length of 4.5 inches, and I'm going to hit enter, and then I will hit the green check mark to accept all of that. So now I want to slice off this corner, and this is very straightforward. So I'm going to use sketch. I'm going to sketch on this face of this object, and then I'm going to go to the front view of this so I can see it happen. So I'm going to go to rectangle, and I'm going to start in this corner, and I'm just going to draw something like this, and then use the dimension tool to dimension this total length right here. So this tells me that this is going to be 1.5, and I'm going to have to do some math. Based on the math in my head, this is going to be 1.5 as well. And then I'm going to finish this sketch. I'm going to go to isometric, and I'm going to go to extrude. I'm going to choose what I want to extrude this. I'm going to hit the remove option. This time I am going to, again, choose through all to cut the entire piece out. Hit the green check button. And now we have completed all of our objects from activity 4.1D. Before I do that, I want to rename this, and we'll call this object 4. And so now we're ready to just kind of finish all this up. I'm going to show you now how to submit this work to me. I want to show you now how I would like you to submit this work. So we've completed all of our parts, and in future videos, future activities and projects, we will do a lot more with Onshape. We'll do assembly files, we'll do explosion drawings, and set up the borders so that we can do a multi-views and add our dimensions for our technical drawings. But let's just say we're done, we're ready to submit this assignment along with your sketches. So the way I would like you to do this is to go to Object 1. You can start there first. And I want you to go down to your Start menu down here, and I want you to search for a program called Snipping Tool. You can type in snip. I hope you have this on your computer, but this is the Snipping Tool program. And if you don't have this, there are other ways to do it, and I can show you how to do that. But hopefully you have this. So basically, we're going to take a snapshot of this view right here. And the way that we're going to do that is we have to have what we want to take a snap of open, and this on top of it. So I'm just going to simply go to New, and what I would like you to do is take maybe from the lower left where you know you're going to capture everything and kind of draw like a rectangle. Make sure to capture your name so I know that this definitely came from you. And then what you can do now that you have this, I can see your object, I can see your name up here, and you'll want to go to File, Save As, and then you can save this in your pictures on your computer, on your desktop, wherever. You can call it Object 1. And then you can do this for the other objects 2, 3, and 4. And so you'll save that, and then you can actually submit that image in Schoology to me. So there are other ways. So once we go back to Onshape, notice I've called this Activity 4.1D. So if I go back to Onshape, one of the projects that are listed is going to be this project that I just created earlier. You can actually share this with me. And so I want to click on it here, and I'm going to try to see if I can show you how to share it. I double clicked on it, so that's how I would do it. So while I'm in this project, actually I could have done it from where I just was a moment ago. So I want to go to share, and you can type in my name, Jason Red, or you can type in my email, jred@aikencountypublicschooldistrict.net. And you can send it to me just like that. I would prefer you do it through Schoology, just simply because it makes grading this assignment a whole lot easier. So you would submit the 4 images of your objects that you created, along with a snapshot of the responses to these questions. You do not have to do the conclusion questions, but you do want to respond to these questions under these objects. But that now completes Activity 4.1D.